let's do another inquiry into our experience. The purpose of this is to show you why is there a desire, what's the purpose of desire, what's your relationship to desire, and how desire moves the whole universe. In Chandogya Upanishad, I think it's chapter 7, it says, Sat eva saumya asit, ekam eva aditiyam. Sat eva asit. Oneness alone was. Ekam eva aditiyam. In the beginning, there was one non-dual existence, one reality. Now, not that there is a beginning, but to help you kind of start at because the mind thinks linear, to start at a certain point. In the beginning, there was only oneness. Now, this oneness we call reality of Brahman, which is awareness or consciousness. So behind me, we have that reality right there, represented as Om. And this reality has a capacity to manifest forms, millions of forms, time, space, periodic table of elements, 5 elements, everything. It has a capacity to manifest a subtle body. And this capacity we call Maya. And this capacity manifests your subtle body. When I say subtle body, I'm talking about just a conglomeration of thoughts and life and beliefs and impressions and personality. So it manifests a subtle body with a personality. And this personality is conditioned by memories, likes and dislikes, past impressions, what it values, what it considers worthy, what is worthy of pursuit, what is not worthy of pursuit, what it thinks will complete itself. It contains ideas about the world, about how things work. So all of these things are stored as thoughts and impressions in the causal body, in the subtle body. For now, we'll just say the subtle body. And this subtle body, you're carrying right now. You're carrying that subtle body in this moment. Your subtle body is different from mine. Your subtle body is different from your fellow colleague, from the fellow student in this class. And this subtle body is in every way conditioned to think in a certain way. Let's talk about what happens. How do you develop this sense of I, or what we call ego or ahamkara? So now that you have this subtle body, which is now created by the capacity of consciousness, what do you think is going to happen next? Now that there is a subtle body, consciousness is pervading, penetrating this subtle body, okay? Now, when it penetrates this subtle body, what happens? A sense of I emerges. Now, this sense of I, which is now taking place here, remember, this is just one subtle body. You've got billions, trillions of subtle bodies that have been manifest in the universe. This is just one, your subtle body. So now from the standpoint of the subtle body, there is I, okay? So if you didn't have this, where would that I be placed? That one existence, it will be placed here. But now that this power, this is a power that happens to manifest these subtle bodies, it creates the subtle body, that one I is experiencing or enjoying its existence from one single standpoint. You see this? So this means if this consciousness didn't have the power to manifest subtle bodies, the world, you and I wouldn't be here. It will be one existence, one total existence. But it just so happens that consciousness does have the capacity to manifest subtle bodies and the world. It just happens. Don't ask why. It's just how it is. For that reason, consciousness pervading this subtle body, what happens? A sense of self is established, which we call the ego or the ahamkara. So this means that you cannot eliminate the ego or the ahamkara. Why? Because the ego, the ahamkara, arises by the presence of the subtle body. Can you eliminate the subtle body? No, because there is a subtle body. You didn't create it. So you can see the non-validity when someone says you have to destroy your ego, you have to destroy your ahamkara. You can't. When the subtle body gets designed as it has, and consciousness pervades the subtle body, ego or sense of I arises. So there's no question of destroying anything. Now, to help you understand this a little bit better, I thought I'd use an analogy. Imagine, follow me along, imagine a sun, one sun, right, shining. And this one sun, who's, which is made out of hydrogen, it's shining, okay? And out of this one sun comes 5 mirrors, or in Australia, they call it mirror, or they want American style, mirror. Maybe I'll interchange. So one sun, from one sun, it just happens to have a power to create out of itself, out of its own hydrogen, right? Atoms, it creates 5 mirrors. And those mirrors are also made of the same substance, right? Because they came from the sun. So it's not like the mirror, just imagine this. I know it's not possible, but just, to help you connect. So now the mirror is made out of the same substance as the sun. So out of the sun comes 5 mirrors. But the 5 mirrors have the capacity to reflect the light of the sun, okay? They reflect the light of the one sun. So you got 5 mirrors reflecting one light. Now, you could call it the light that they're reflecting. It's called, suppose you call it reflected light, suppose, reflected, because it's, it's reflecting. Why is it reflecting? Why do we call it reflected light? Because of the medium, because of the mirror. If you had no mirror, there is no reflected light. It's just light. But now that you have a mirror, right, there is a light, but it's called now reflected light. But now, is the reflected light different from the sunlight? No, because it's just light. Light is photons, right? Light is from the sun is photons, the reflected light is photons. Photons are photons. It's made out of the same substance. So don't now think that reflected light is different from the original light, right? It's the same light. But do know that there is a reflected light. Now, suppose that this mirror doesn't have sun knowledge, or should we call it self-knowledge? It doesn't have sun knowledge. So now when the sunlight hits the mirror, and this mirror doesn't understand that this light, what is the nature of this light, then what is because of the ignorance that belongs to the mirror, to the subtle body, which I'm equating to the subtle body, so the mirror is equated to the subtle body, what is naturally going to happen when this one light strikes the mirror equated to the subtle body? The mirror is going to think this light belongs to me. Understand? It belongs to the mirror. It's not going to say that this reflected light is actually the sunlight. It's not going to do that. So where does knowledge belong? Where does knowledge of this one light belong? Where is it stored? Where does it take place? In the mirror, which is equated to the subtle body. So that which is shining on the subtle body, on your mind, if that mind or subtle body doesn't understand what is the nature of that which is shining, which is consciousness, which is self-evident I, if it doesn't know, then it's going to naturally assume that which is shining, consciousness, self-evident I, belongs to the mirror. You follow me so far? So now, if we bring this into a ignorant mirror and wise mirror, what does the ignorant mirror think when the light shines onto it, when the light is striking onto it? It thinks that that which is shining on me is always bending and moving. Have you ever seen a mirror bend like that? What happens to the light that's reflecting on the mirror that's bending? The light is getting fatter and it's getting thinner. What happens when the mirror moves? The light is moving. You understand? So it's almost like always the light is moving. And the light is compared to I, which is not different from the original sunlight. Follow me? And that original sunlight is called Brahman, right? Consciousness. So now it seems like the mirror is moving and the light is always moving, right? I am moving. Is that your experience when you walk? The self-evident I always seems to be moving. You see this? You're a mirror, just like that. You're a mirror. You're like a mirror reflecting consciousness. Consciousness, which is known to you as self-evident I. So whatever happens to the mirror, to the subtle body, it's going to seem to affect the light that is striking upon it. That is the experience of the ignorant mirror, the one that is yet to come to this knowledge. What's the experience? What's the understanding of the wise mirror? Well, the wise mirror understands, because where does the knowledge take place? Right, in the subtle body, on the mirror. That which is striking upon me, which is the light, which is known to me as self-evident I, is there any difference between that light and the one light which is not moving, which is all pervasive? Is there any difference? No difference at all. But it seems, while there is a subtle body or a mirror, it seems like, right, when it's moving, when it's bending, that's called your emotions and your thoughts, when it's bending and it's moving, that which is striking upon it, which is consciousness, is also bending and moving. But what does the wise mirror cognitively know? It seems like that, but is it actually like that? Is the light actually moving? No. So look at this. The experience is that the light is moving. But is the light actually moving? What is my cognitive knowledge, despite my experience that the light is moving? What is my cognitive knowledge of that light, which is as though moving? It's not moving. You understand? So you cognitively understand that the light is not moving, but the experience is giving you such that it's as though moving. Therefore, your knowledge cancels out the experience. What happens when this light strikes the mirror? Does the mirror remain clean at all times? No, the mirror has smudges. So the reflected light, which is not different from the original light, gets mixed up with the smudges of the mirror. Another way to put it is the ahamkara, your sense of I, which is not different from the total I. You understand? The ahamkara seems, because it's striking, right? The consciousness, total consciousness, is striking one medium, which is always limited. The subtle body is limited. It ends, the boundaries of the subtle body end. So now when the one all-pervasive light strikes this limited medium, and this one all-pervasive light is I, then what is the experience from the standpoint of the ignorant subtle body? I am limited. You understand? Because remember, you got many, many mediums. You got medium 1, medium 2. You got 8 billion mediums. They're called subtle bodies. And when one consciousness pervades one subtle body, then from the standpoint of that subtle body, which is always limited and filled with desires and fancies and likes and dislikes and impressions, then I, which is pervading that subtle body, takes on, borrows those limitations and fancies and desires and whatever your conditions and what is worthy of pursuit and what is not worthy of pursuit. Now, who has a problem? Actually, the subtle body has the problem. The mirror has the smudges. But what is shining on that mirror which has the smudges? I, the total light, am shining on that. And because this reflecting medium, the subtle body, doesn't have the knowledge of that which is shining, the knowledge that that which is shining is actually all pervasive and it's never moving, that knowledge is not there. The natural assumption thus becomes, I am shining and I am localized to the subtle body. Therefore, whatever happens to the subtle body, and when are things not happening to the subtle body, it's always going through changes and desires and fancies, is always happening to that which is shining, because it's now a mix-up. Therefore, I becomes agitated. I become a seeker to seek for a solution, because the agitation is covering my nature. What do I believe now? That in order to get rid of this limitation, what do I have to do? What's the means by which you get rid of limitations? Desire. It's a mechanism to gain certain objects which the subtle body finds worthwhile. So now, I, shining on the subtle body, have taken on the limitations of the subtle body, and everyone's subtle body has limitations, including yours, including mine, ideas that serve as covers, such as loneliness. Now, loneliness becomes a mental agitation. Now, your subtle body has an idea what object will remove loneliness. Ah, relationship, a pet, a dog. During COVID, in Australia at least, what happened to our dear dogs? They were all purchased out. Why? Because we were held home and we could no longer be exposed to those objects which we used to help us remove our mental agitation. So what do we have to do? We had to buy an object to remove our mental agitation. The moment the curfew ended, we sold our dogs. Look at this. So this means that the way for this I, which is pure and limitless, the way for it to come back to its intrinsic nature, which is happiness, the way to do that is through desires. But actually, desires are just a mechanism for objects. But actually, objects are just a means to remove mental agitation. And what comes underneath? What is always there when the mental agitation is swiped away? Happiness. Do you have to kind of move that mental agitation and go, okay, what do I want underneath to appear? Do I want peace? Do I want happiness? Do I want misery? Do you have to think like that? No. You remove that mental agitation, what comes through automatically without any effort? Effortless happiness. Now, what else is effortless? Self-evident I. So is there any difference between self-evident I or consciousness and happiness? No. That is why the rishis say, what is Sat-Chit? What is consciousness? It is the nature of happiness or ananda. They're one and the same. So therefore, the mechanism to gain objects becomes desires. And when desires are gained, when that desire of yours gains that object. So what is a desire? It's a mechanism. It's a motivator to gain objects. But why are you gaining objects? For object's sake or for your sake? Now, when I say your sake, for the sake of gaining happiness. So therefore, happiness has to be you. Now that the object has been gained, suppose you gain the object, which has moved or swiped that mental agitation away. What comes underneath? you, happiness. Is that addictive? Yes, it is. What is the most addictive thing in the world? Happiness. You think it's drugs? No. Drugs are an object which guarantees to remove mental agitation. And what's underneath? Happiness. Drugs are not addictive. Happiness is addictive. Therefore, what happens now? Now that my mistake, this is where we all go wrong. We mistake that what brought me happiness was the object. This is common error across the board. So what do you develop an addiction for? Now that you've linked happiness to an object, you develop an addiction, or should we say attachment, for an object. You see now why the scriptures keep on saying the wise person is detached? What do they mean? The wise person understands that objects hold no happiness. The happiness I already am. I'm just using objects. I'm just using you as my spouse, as my child, as the fancies, the water slides, the nice house, the luxurious lifestyle. I am just using all of that. You're using all of that for one purpose. This is a brutal truth that is hard to hear. Everything in your life that you've ever surrounded yourself with was only for one purpose alone. You couldn't stand your mental agitation, and you were hoping that object will remove your mental agitation so that you can get a glimpse of your intrinsic nature, which is happiness. And it is so pleasing, so addictive, that happiness, and due to the error, we then form an addiction to the object. Now, when we fall for that addiction, or we develop an attachment for that object, what happens next? Because you've been around for lifetimes, you know that the fear is going to come, because that object can change any moment. And when it changes, it's going to take away that which is most addictive to me, which is happiness. Or your value towards that object can also change. In that case, also, your happiness can go away any moment. So once attachment forms to an object, which was initially to remove my mental agitation, now that objects end up giving you what? Fear. That the object is going to change, or you will change in reference to the object. Therefore, you will no longer admire the subject, and now you have to get rid of the object. Fear. When fear develops, what happens next? Mental agitation. Look at this. Object initially that was there to remove my mental agitation ended up creating the very mental agitation once again. Therefore, all objects in your life, the moment you go out today, whatever the weather is, everything you ever wanted in your life, remember this, it was only for the sake of managing those covers, like the clouds covering the sun. I want to blow that cloud away temporarily because I cannot stand being covered by it. I want me. I want self, which is of the nature of fullness, which manifests as happiness. You only ever wanted yourself. Think about this. You only ever in your life, in all pursuits, no matter how courageous, how show-offish, how brilliant, all certificates, children, pets, experiences, social status, social standing, money, house, everything you ever surround yourself with was only to appreciate yourself. Because those objects only serve to remove those clouds that were temporarily denying you from your intrinsic nature, which is happiness. So now, when you go out and you see that fancy object, let's analyze what's happening just to desire a fancy object. Suppose you see a fox or a hunk. We'll call him a fox hunk. Why do I want a fox hunk? What does that reveal? Let's go step by step. The fact that there is a desire for a fox hunk, what does that show? Number one, I have a value for Foksang. I've learned through memory. It's stored in my memory. Foksang has the capacity to remove my mental agitation. Therefore, the value now becomes for chasing Foksangs. Number two, it shows you that there is mental agitation in your mind. Three, it shows you that you are taking those mental agitations as mine. You see, there is no problems with mental agitation. There is no problems with mental agitation. The problem is with taking those agitations, those desires, those needs, those wants as mine. Remember, go back to the inquiry. Ahamkara, the reflected light, is pure. It's as pure as the original light. Okay? Just like you take the, inside, right? Inside this container, you can call this reflected space. And outside the total space is the total space. Is there any difference between this space, the reflected space, and the total space? Zero. Now, we just happen to call this reflected space Chidabhasa, Pratibimba, Chaitanya, whatever you want to call it. We just happen to call it Ahamkara or the ego or the I sense. But is there any difference between this I sense, this as though contained consciousness, and the total consciousness? Is there any difference? None whatsoever, which is why last week I said, do not say there are two I's. Your Ahamkara I is the total I. It only becomes a problem when you take this when the Ahamkara takes these limitations of the subtle body, these needs, these wants, these fancies, these desires, and it says they belong to me. Taking ownership of them becomes the problem. The fact that they are there is not a problem at all. Because how long has this subtle body been here? Friends, trillions upon trillions upon trillions of years. Are you trying to solve a desire that has been there for trillions of years? You're trying to fix that which can ever be fixed? You see this? The only solution is to recognize, yes, the light is shining on. And it seems like from the standpoint of the subtle body that this light now that is shining, which is consciousness, is now mixed up with all of this scrap that's inside your subtle body. But what does the wise person know? Despite it seeming like so, it's not the case. The light is always pure. The reflected light, which is not different from the original light, is always pure. Therefore, the error becomes claiming these things as mine. It's not the fact that these things are true. Understand this. Otherwise, you will spend here forever. The problem is constantly giving attention. Oh, I've got a desire. I have to pursue. No. What has a deficiency? What has a limitation? Your subtle body. How long has your subtle body been here? Millions and trillions of years. Are you the subtle body? No. It's just one of the many creations in this universe. One little subtle body out of trillions. And because consciousness is pervading that subtle body, from the standpoint of that subtle body, it says now, oh, I need to go and pursue what this scrap wants, what this subtle body wants. Look at this. It's insane. So what does self-knowledge then tell you? It shows you despite the presence, I know Sharmali, despite the presence of the limitations and desires and fancies, likes and dislikes, remind yourself, this does not belong to I. It never has. And I know this is going to be hard because who gets taught this in school? Who gets told this by parents? Who gets told this at work? No. Who gets told this in family? Nobody. You see why this is not so easy? Because you spend your whole life thinking, these are my problems. I have to repair this. The thing is, ahamkara was never, or reflected consciousness, which is not different from original consciousness, was never broken to begin with. That's the first solution. The sense of I that you now enjoy. Put your hands up here, a sense of I, that you exist, conscious, I'm conscious. You're conscious, right? Good. That sense of I is not different from the one I, which is called Brahman. This is the understanding. It only seems different because there is a presence of the subtle body. But this subtle body is not yours. You have been pervading billions and billions of subtle bodies for lifetimes. This is just one subtle body that you consciousness are pervading. Last lifetime, you consciousness were pervading somebody else's subtle body, some different subtle body. In fact, you're pervading 8 billion subtle bodies right now. But due to the proximity, we give it much importance. So the first solution is we need to remind ourselves, this does not belong to me. Second of all, my ahamkara, my sense of I, is not broken because my ahamkara is not different from the original light, from the original consciousness. So don't say ahamkara is one thing, you have to eliminate it. It's just look at it like this. Because the subtle body is there, when consciousness pervades the subtle body, a sense of self comes through. That's called the ahamkara. It's just how it is. Let me just finish this. The next thing I want to point out is, suppose you go out now and you see a fancy object. Think of this mnemonic, something memorable. What's going to happen? Suppose you get this object. Why do you want an object? Let's start with this question. I'll open up questions now. Why do you want an object? Step one. Okay, you open your eyes and you fancy that object and not this object. Why is that? Speak freely.
Because you value it?
Because you value it. Does some other subtle body value it? No. Now, why do you value it and someone else doesn't value it? What does that imply? It's a memory. It's nothing but a memory. Okay. So now you value an object. Now, when you get an object, and what's the means to get an object? Desire. That's a mechanism, what motivates you to get an object. Why do you want to get an object? Answer, please.
Because you feel getting that will make you happy.
Okay. What specifically, good Vijay, what specifically would it do to the subtle body when you get an object?
Yeah.
Removes the emptiness.
It will remove the emptiness, it will remove the what we call mental agitation. Okay. You understand? So, yes, go.
There's one more thing.
Go.
It makes you pleasant. That is one thing. It makes you feel pleasant. Second thing, it further boosts your ahamkar. It further gives a boost to your ahamkar, and there you get trapped more. Even if you have got some pleasantness, which is closer to your true nature, but still it has boosted your ahamkar and takes you away that way.
Good. So it has reinforced that indeed I am an individual who needs a desire to fulfill myself. And the only way to fulfill myself is by gaining objects. So therefore, not only has it boosted a sense of individuality, who's different from the total, it's also reinforced the fact that you need objects for your happiness, which means that your happiness is where? Not here, happiness is in the objects. Therefore, you are further dividing yourself, that your nature is, you're putting your nature in the hands of someone else. You're putting your happiness in the hands of someone else. Now, how about we ask, when the object has been gained, what comes underneath is happiness, which is your intrinsic nature. Okay. What follows then? What comes after that?
Mental agitation, securing it and making sure nothing happens to it.
Attachment. What's another word for attachment? It's an addiction to the object. Why are we addicted to the object when when the happiness doesn't belong to the object? Why are we addicted to the object? Because of ignorance towards what? Make it more specific.
Towards what's actually towards the object bringing you happiness. That's not what's bringing you happiness, right?
Good, good. Okay, so in other words, you have ignorance of the fact you don't know that happiness is actually you. Your nature is happiness. But owing to not having the knowledge, ignorance, you think that the happiness belongs to an object. Therefore, the whole life becomes a pursuit of objects. Is this a common experience that you observe in life? So once again, why do we all observe this in the past, present, and future? Because it's a universal error, universal ignorance, assuming that the happiness is in the object. Therefore, the whole life becomes about breakups, more marriage. Breakups, more marriage. The person hasn't figured out the simple truth that Mr. or Mrs. was only a means to remove this annoyance from my mind. I didn't actually want them. What did I want? I wanted myself, whose nature is happiness. That's what I want. They were just the means for me to kind of, to have. And I kept them. And what happened then? I developed attachment to them. But then that attachment, someone said, led to fear. Why fear?
Disappointment. Disappointment, because all things born in time have an expiry date.
Yeah, exactly.
So because they're impermanent, they're mithya, they're impermanent. So they all have expiry dates. So we're constantly, perpetually chasing more objects to temporarily fulfill that desire. So desire is continuous.
And not only that, but the object cannot truly permanently remove your mental agitation, because the object is changing. So the moment the object is different and your subtle body's rules no longer conform to how that object now looks like, that means once the object develops one freckle and your subtle body says, no, she should have completely clear skin, then guess what? That object has lost its capacity to remove your mental agitation. Now the Mr. starts to chase for those who don't have one freckles, because it has to satisfy the conditions of the subtle body. And the second problem is the very conditions that you carry are changing in reference to the object. So even if the object remains the same, will your idea how the object should be, will that remain the same?
No.
It never does. It never does, because you too are carrying rules that are constantly shaping and shifting based on the new social media posts that you see. Tomorrow, I see this all the time, I tell you. The wife, which is very content with the husband, gets on, someone introduces her to social media, and now she sees all these hunks. And now she goes, you know what? I think I don't need this guy anymore. Much better man. Yesterday, she was completely content with him. Today, she saw something new because her eyes are working. And now her entire rule set about who is a stable man, who is an attractive man, completely shifted. Therefore, what then happens after that? Now you want to get rid of the object. Mental agitation. What we need to see is no possible solution in the world of objects. You cannot win in this place. Understand this. You cannot win the journey of happiness on earth. It's impossible, because all journeys of happiness depend upon objects. Every single book that's being talked about how to get happiness, throw it out, because they always talk about working on your values, having the right mindset, surrounding yourself with a healthy body, living in a nice place, having a lot of money. It all depends on objects. Understand this. You can get happiness. In fact, how does a wise person enjoy permanent happiness? We discussed this last week. Because the wise person knows, even if I don't see the sun and it's covered by the clouds, does that mean the sun is not there? No. My Brahman Ananda is always there, even when it's covered by 10,000 desires of rules that have to be in my life for those for those mental agitations to go away. Do you understand now what I mean by cognitive knowledge? Even though this instrument may not be experiencing happiness right now, does that matter? It doesn't matter, because when is this instrument not going to have mental agitations? Show me, please. When is it not going to have mental agitations? Never. You can be living 10,000 years. In fact, the 10,000 years is going to have a lot more mental agitation if you live 100 years. There will never be a time when mental agitations are completely removed from this instrument. Understand this. And if I want objects to change for my sake, for my rules, think about what you're doing. The object has to remove a freckle to satisfy the conditions of my subtle body. Why? So that the mental agitation can be removed and I can experience my own true nature. Think about how much pressure we put on others just so that they can be a means for our mental agitation removal.
Yeah. This sounds like it all goes back to discernment and kind of vairagya. Those part of those are 4 practices or prerequisites. I just want to that's my understanding. Is that correct? Is this part of discernment, and is this part of strengthening our discernment to see through this?
Good. So Kendall is now bringing 2 words. He's bringing dispassion and discernment. So first of all, you need discernment to recognize that this object, as Lorena said, has no capacity to permanently remove that mental agitation. That is the first thing that I have to understand. It just doesn't have. Please understand this right now. No object in your life, no matter how pretty, nice, great it is, it will not remove your mental agitation permanently. Guaranteed. The mental agitation will come back, guaranteed. This is the first part of maturity. Otherwise, we're on a constant chase. The moment someone doesn't show us, what we want to see, we give them a hard time. But it's actually just about you. You want them to remove your mental agitation so you can become in touch with yourself. You see how selfish it becomes? By expecting others to change for my sake? It's amazing. And they're doing the same thing onto me. So now the initial thing that was meant to free you, a relationship that was meant to give you, enhance your work, enhance your existence on earth, ends up being a burden, ends up putting pressure, ends up, making you small. That is not fair. Therefore, you have to stand up. The first step is to discern what's really going on behind the scenes, not only from this standpoint, but from the other standpoint. And this discernment, Kendall, is what gives you dispassion. That means now you're not so sort of grabbing on, I have to have it, otherwise I can't live without it, I'll never be happy. No, the wise person understands, even if the happiness is not here, what is my intrinsic nature? Happiness. It never went away. But for the unwise person, when happiness goes away, I tell you, it goes away. So what does the unwise person has to do? He has to get another object to remove more mental agitation to have happiness. But the wise person understands, even when happiness is not here, I am still happiness. My happiness never went away. It is just temporarily covered by mental agitation because of the subtle body, which is 10 trillion years old. And there's no point trying to remove those agitations because another agitation is going to come by because you're dealing with trillions of years of impressions. There's always going to be one more impression, one more reason to create that cover. Understand this. You can't win this process of clearing the mind and remaining clear all the time. You can't win. The only thing you can do is understand, even if this person is agitated and desirous and not happy, I am happy. My nature is happiness. My nature is fullness. It never went away anywhere. All of these problems, this crap belongs to Andre. It belongs to your name. It's not yours. That's the only real solution.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. So I guess while we have subtle bodies, then is there no way to be happy?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? The happiness will come, right? So naturally, right, you can surround yourself with objects, right? I'm not saying now, just because you know this now, I'm intentionally not going to surround myself with objects just so I can give myself an impression that I'm wise. And that's not what we're saying. Right? Naturally, you will surround yourself with objects, but just understand this, that happiness, by the very presence of the subtle body, will not last long. That's all I'm saying. It will not last long. And don't take this personally. It's not supposed to last long. As long as there's a subtle body, which is filled with billions of trillions of impressions, which are always one more reason to add that cover, understand it is not supposed to last long. This is where everyone, the spiritual person, goes wrong. They want to remove that cover and enjoy and experience happiness all the time. It's simply not going to happen. The only solution is to recognize, even if experiential happiness is not here, my nature is happiness. That keeps you on your toes. That keeps you upright. That keeps you strong, even when things are not right.
So is happiness then just not having any desires and agitation?
No, because see, where does desire, Sharmi, where does it belong? It belongs in the subtle body. So it's an empirical design. So, which is an empirical design, like the sun. I can't get rid of the sun. You know, I can't get rid of the trees and nature. It's a creation of this whole system, right? So the desires will still come through because you have to contribute to, you know, your family. That is an empirical design, just like animals, right, have to contribute to their, you know, to their species. Human beings have to contribute to their upbringing, to their own livelihood, to their own, have to contribute to the society. All of this is inbuilt because Krishna said, remember, dharma is inbuilt into the hearts of all men. The sense of duty, which is nothing but desire to do my duty, the sense of duty is built into the hearts of all men. So there will still be desires, but as far as not having desires, we will see in the next verse, the only desires that I have to work through are those which are unhealthy for me. Unhealthy desires. This one has to be kind of reduced. But healthy desires, you know, eating and sleeping and talking and learning and contributing to the society and taking care of your family, this is all empirical Ishvara design. You cannot get rid of that.
Yeah. So Andre, this mental agitation is there even in a wise person, right?
Yeah.
You're saying that the person also gets it, but he realizes that by getting some object which may have come into his, which maybe he's not pursuing, but he happened to see it or he sees it in others and he feels, yes, that will give me happiness. But he fights over his mind and doesn't go for it. Or how is he different from someone who says, yeah, let me momentarily get happiness? Everyone knows probably that everything is momentary, that it's a pleasure that just comes for some time.
Yeah.
But the weak people will go for it and enjoy that momentary pleasure and then again start the journey again for the next object. But a wise person, what is he doing? Is he realizing the impermanent nature of that object and letting it go and fighting his mind saying, no, I don't know what is that word for it. Staying away from things which you feel will not give you the eternal joy.
Good. It's a brilliant question, Vijay. So how does what's the relationship of the wise person and desires? How does he or she deal with desires? There's two answers to this. First of all, it's not that moksha makes you dispassionate towards objects. You've understood this value of objects already before moksha. So you've thought about it for so long, for a couple of years, to the point where you're just, you know, and I can help you relate to this. As children, how many desires do we have for toys? Are those desires still here as adults? No. But are you now disgusted towards toys? You're not disgusted. You just see they have no real value. They are what they are. They can do a certain thing, but I just don't need them anymore. So the more we start to have the same attitude through our own maturity in reference to worldly objects, the more you can just have them at your house like a toy, but you're not sort of just so moved and so shaken by the presence of this toy in your house, right? You just deal with it objectively. The second answer is that, yes, the wise person still, being free, can pursue a desire, but those desires which are pursued are healthy, they're keeping with dharma, and they certainly bring some pleasure, because that is just the nature of this empirical design. You naturally want to pursue desires which will bring you some pleasure, which will, when I say pleasure, that means they will indeed remove the mental agitation, right? For sure. They are aligned to dharma. That's what the wise person, they're always dharmic pursuits. And thereby it's like there's no issue with that at all. It's a wonderful thing to do. Therefore, two answers. First of all, yes, he or she recognizes the happiness, this object has no power to give me happiness. The happiness I already am right now. And even if I get this happiness, what's going to happen? Remember the mnemonic, AFA, attachment is going to lead to fear. Fear is going to lead to agitation. AFA, attachment, fear, agitation. So the wise person has this little thing going on in their head, and thereby they can, either of those two are possible. There's no definitive.
But in the beginning, would he not have to really fight his inherent desire to get it? Because only over a period of time, maybe you get into that state which you just mentioned, right?
But it's not a fighting. This is very important. That's a very good thing you brought up. It's not a fighting. It's a reflection on the true value. How much can this really do for me? And what's the final result of all of this? It's going to be in my life. It's going to remove mental agitation. And then what's going to happen? AFA, attachment, fear, agitation. It's just a reflection that he or she has done long enough to simply walk out of this room, of this door, and be there in the world and go, you know what? That class made a lot of sense. Wow, that's what's really going on. And naturally, not fighting, naturally, you have a dispassion towards objects.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you very much.
So he has self-reflected rather than fighting. Forget about fighting. Fighting, you're going to fail. I'll show you why. Because willpower, yeah, you're going to fail like crazy if you fight. It's a self-reflection that brings you to this natural dispassion towards objects. Gautam.
Andre, I just want to know, like last week also you said, and this week also, what I am not able to relate. The whole problem is that we place our I sense in the BMI and not the real I, but you say there is only one I. So how do you resolve this? Okay,
good. So the I sense, remember I sense is like the reflected light. Is the reflected light any different from the original light, Gautam?
Yeah.
It's not, because it's both photons, right? So the reflected light is the original light. So there's no problem with the I sense. The I sense, another name for I sense is that reflected light. You see?
Yeah.
Now, reflected light is exactly the same substance as the original light. Now, why do I call it reflected light? Why don't I just call it light? Because there is a medium, right? It's kind of bouncing back on the mirror. The mirror is the subtle body. Okay? So there's no problem with your I sense. Because what is your I sense? Your I sense is the knowledge, the effortless knowledge that I am. Effortless knowledge that I am, that I exist, that I am conscious. It is evident to all of us in every movement of the mirror, of the person, of the subtle body, call it whatever you want. Every movement, I know that I am. 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 When the mirror goes like this and now the light is fat, I know that I am. When the mirror goes like this and the light is small, feeling small, I know that I am. So what is changing? The conditions of the seeming conditions of the light. You understand? The seeming conditions of the light. But I know that I am. Is that changing, Gautam?
I just want to know one more thing.
Okay.
Now, I am sense is there, but the problem is what we suffix with I am. I am Gautam. I am Indian. I am Hindu. I am brown. I am father.
Yeah.
So the suffix is the one which is the ahamkar part. If we remove the suffix, then we go to the real I.
Yeah, exactly. So all of those later words, right? Indian, this, and that. That's all just owing to the reflecting medium, to the subtle body. But the self-evident I that precedes all of them, that is the ahamkara. But is the ahamkara any different from original light? Is the reflected light any different from the original light? No. So yes, there is an ahamkara. But the truth of ahamkara, of this sense of I, is the original I, original consciousness.
I get your point.
Think about this,
Thank
please. Just think about it for next week. I want to make sure this is absolutely clear. So I think what you want to ask is, what's the difference between ahamkara and Brahman? Would we say that? Ahamkara and Brahman.
Basically, I want to say that I remove this I sense from the BMI and shed out all the suffixes.
You're not going to remove it. No, you're not going to remove the I sense, because when is your I sense, when is your sense of I ever separated from a thought? Tell me.
No, just the suffix part. I shed out all the suffix part and then what remains is the real thing.
Yeah, but despite the suffix, despite the Gautam and Indian, despite that, I is still there. And cognitively, I know that I which is still there is not different from Brahman. That's a fact.
Yes.
So
Yes,
let the I apparently change. Let the I apparently take on different roles. They can't stop that. You can't stop that. Because there is a mixture of medium and light. If we didn't have this capacity called Maya, we would not have no problems. We would not have this discussion. But because we have Maya, this capacity to produce these mediums called subtle bodies, when consciousness hits the medium called Gautam subtle body, then a sense of I is established over here. And the sense of I is not different from the total I. But from this standpoint, the sense of I is going to take on certain limitations, but it actually doesn't take on limitations. That's what I want to bring out. The light, when it's seemingly fat because of the mirror, right now it's a big fat, is the light any different from the original light? It's still photons. It's still the same light. So this is a cognitive understanding. When I feel fat, when I feel down, when I feel unhappy, is the I really fat, unhappy, or down? No. What is happy, down, or fat? The subtle body. That's the distinction of a wise person.
One last question,
Go ahead.
Andre. This
Go ahead.
I have last 2-3 classes back I had asked.
Oh, go.
Now, does the wise man have at all the sense of I? If everything is I, so if you have a sense of I, then it becomes a subject and object, which we don't have in a deep sleep.
Got it.
So any I, does it have to be there? Any I whatsoever?
Even
shouldn't this be only amness and not I amness? Only amness.
No, just I amness or amness, the same thing. The only difference for a wise person is they recognize cognitively I amness. That I amness, the sense of I, right, that you talk about, that sense of I, which is as though limited, as though contained to this much, the space which is as though contained by the presence of the boundaries of this container. Is this sense of I any different from the total I? Is this space, which we call ahamkara, ego, is this space any different from the total space?
No.
No, because the total space is attributeless. It accommodates the whole universe. This space accommodates your thoughts, your emotions. It's the same space in that same way.
That
sense of I.
That I includes everything. If it does not identify with the BMI, then that I includes everything. Then everything is I only.
Yes, everything is I. Correct. And why is there a BMI? Because of Brahman's capacity to manifest these subtle bodies, which is the problem. Until it's no longer a problem. That's when you gain self-knowledge. Then it's no longer a problem. Until you gain self-knowledge, this thing right here is a problem. Because it gets mixed up. It makes you, the all-pervasive consciousness, as though this much small. Therefore, self-knowledge removes this limitation. The limitation was never there. You understand? So the wise person comes to accept the fact or recognize the fact that I don't have to fix I. Where are the problems? In the subtle body. How old is the subtle body? Many, many generations. Can I ever fix the subtle body? Can a subtle body ever be fixed? No. Therefore, the wise person is okay with the subtle body's quirks and limitations and this and that. This is crucial to understand. Otherwise, you will never be happy. You will always want to constantly pursue objects to remove mental agitation and get a glimpse of self. What does a wise person recognize? That happiness is always here and now. I don't have to get an object to appreciate myself as happiness. I am happiness.
The desire to even pursue spirituality can be coming from the subtle body, right? So we can't say that, let's say, desire to pursue spirituality.
Right.
is something which is something which comes out from the subtle body, this particular
Good,
need
excellent,
or desire.
excellent. Good. See, what has desires, please? What has desires to attain moksha? Is it the all-pervasive consciousness, which is changeless? No, because to have no desire for moksha and to suddenly have a desire for moksha, that's a change. But what is consciousness? That which is changeless. Therefore, desires cannot belong to that evident I. What develops desires? Your maturity. The maturity of the subtle body comes to see the limitations of objects, and it comes somehow, it weaves its way to the teacher, and the teacher shows you that you cannot win this game of spirituality that are always trying to offer you some kind of an experience. Did you ever notice how in spirituality they give you some experience with an object? You know, they touch you or they give you something. It's the same idea. In the world, you've been given what kind of objects? Car and house. But in spirituality, what the objects are still there. The object just changes, but it's still same ignorance. Objects can help you get in touch with your happiness. So let me give you a spiritual object, a spiritual experience. Okay, thank you. And then you drink something, some drug, or what do they do? You get, you know, you sing, or you chant, or you wave your hands up. That's an object. It's an experience. You chant, you totally forget about all of your problems in this moment, no mental agitation, and you're happy. Same problem. Object after object after object. So Advaita Vedanta doesn't give you objects, it shows you cognitively, you are already that which you're seeking. Right now, don't worry about your covers. Your covers will never go away. Forget about it.
So formative years of human birth, where we are not very aware of anything, are not adding much to our learning of Vedanta, because we're still figuring out a lot about even ourselves or just life. So it can only happen with maturity, and I mean there's no age to maturity, and I think maturity cannot be quantified. Yeah, so the child, I mean the first 20 years or say is, or maybe up till teenage year, up till when a person is 18. There is no, I assume there is not much awareness, but I can be wrong. But this knowledge is not readily available for us to study and learn.
Yeah.
This is not a question, just my thoughts.
But that's true. But that's also because in the early formative years, the need for those desires to be fulfilled, it's very strong, and it has a certain place for them to come out. Otherwise, if a person buries them, they will just create psychological problems down the road in their older years. You know, they hit 40 and 50, and suddenly they want these things that you should have wanted as a child. So there's also a natural order to wanting things in your early years, and then you very quickly figure out, you know, yeah, it's not a big deal, and then you're kind of free. You're much more free now in older years to pursue what's more precious, and that's called maturity also. So that's why it's important not to hinder our desires, because desires send you out into the world and they show you your own flaws, your own the flaws in the subconscious mind, in the subtle body. Now look at this. What does Vedanta attack? It attacks two things. The first thing that Vedanta attacks is those strong impressions in the subtle body, because remember how we said the consciousness is always shining on the subtle body? Well, as long as you have these extreme, strong impressions in the subtle body, where is the I constantly going to be focused on?
Outside
on those impressions in the subtle body. You see? So you can't just tell a person, they're not mine. You know, these desires are not mine. These problems are not mine. If the problem is huge and loud, you can't just tell to a child, you know, just ignore it. It's not your problems. They're not going to listen. It's such a strong pull that the I always wants to attach onto it. It always wants to attend onto it. That is why Vedanta has a relative place for helping us decrease those impressions in the subtle body. decrease those unconscious drives and all of the distortions. That's the first thing. So it attacks the subtle body. That means it helps you to have a more relatively peaceful life. The second attack that Vedanta does, it then shows you even this ahamkara, this is what Gautam was saying, even this ahamkara, don't stop there. Because where does most of the world stop? Where is their eye placed? In the ahamkara. Don't stop there. The truth of that ahamkara is actually unchanging, which is known to everyone as self-evident I in every situation. The situation may be different. The thought may be different. The emotion may be different. But is the self-evident I different? The fact that I am in that emotion, is that different? The fact that I am tomorrow, would that I am be any different tomorrow? No. What will be different tomorrow? Tomorrow, the person will be different, the thoughts will be different, the weather will be different, the sounds will be different, the smell in the house will be different. But the fact that I am is the exact same I am as now. So Vedanta then shows you even the ahamkara. That is not your final I. The truth of the ahamkara is the same truth of the whole universe, which is Brahman, which is one universal awareness.
So just to clarify, does that mean that we as ahamkara, we just appear and disappear in the universal consciousness, taking a form?
I mean, who's the we that appears and disappears? I mean, the ahamkara disappears and appears, sure, but I'm not sure what you mean by we. Let me put it to you this way. So remember how I said at the beginning, all that is here is one, okay? All that is here is one consciousness. From this one consciousness arises a subtle body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one consciousness is pervading this subtle body. It's going through your thoughts, through your emotions. Now, from the standpoint of that subtle body, what establishes is a sense of I. Okay? So, but what is the truth of that sense of I? It is the same I, so it's one I. So nothing kind of really disappears and appears. You just have to understand that when a subtle body comes, a sense of individuated I develops. But is that individuated I any different from the original I? No.
Does that mean we look at it as layers?
I mean, your thoughts are layers, your personality are layers, your emotions are layers, but those things, yeah, they change. They are they disappear and they appear. That's their job. Okay, look at this, Lavanya. Okay, when your thought disappears, what is still there?
The sense of the presence that I am still there.
Okay, excellent. So I asked, when a thought disappears, what is still there? I am there. Okay. When the thought when the thought comes, what is still there?
I am plus that thought.
While the thought is persisting, while the thought is lasting, what is still there?
The I that is observing the thought.
Excellent.
Which is I am.
Good. So I am is in all states, is in all possible conditions. But what is what's undergoing? What is, in your words, disappearing? What is, in your words, vanishing? The thought, which is the subtle body. You see, the subtle body. That's subtle body is just another name for a thought. Okay, emotions. But that which is underlining all of that, which is, in your words, observing, in whose presence they're observed, that never disappears.
So it's just another extension question. Thank you for the clarification for the first part. So when we sleep, in deep sleep, do we still have the sense of I am there?
In deep sleep, you are still there, but the reflecting medium, the subtle body, is not there. Now, because the reflecting medium, remember the reflecting medium we said to a mirror, like a mirror? The mirror is temporarily, right? It's not there. So now there's nothing to reflect the original light. And that's why, even though you're still there, there is no experience of the world. Because what is it that gives experience of the world? Your mind.
The medium, yeah, your mind, the subtle body.
So, which is a reflecting medium. So when the reflecting medium collapses, then this light has nowhere to hit. So you just endlessly, it's all pervasive. It's all pervasive. That is how deep sleep is, isn't it? All pervasive, which they call happiness or deep sleep, or right? It's all pervasive. But because there's no subtle body, there's nothing to kind of say, oh, look, I am all pervasive. Yes, you're all pervasive in a deep sleep, but there is no mind, there's no prerna, there's no Andre, there's no Gautam, there's no Leo in deep sleep. Therefore, there's no experience of Andre or Gautam or, or Lavanya.
I see. Thank you. That's beautifully said. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but we say I had a good sleep. Who can say that? Contemplate on that. So I had a good sleep. In other words, you must then be there to say I had a good sleep, right? Otherwise, if you were not there, you will not say I had a good sleep. And the fact that you want to go to sleep implies you know that you want to go out of existence in deep sleep. You want to go to sleep? Of course I want to go to sleep. But in deep sleep, are you the person there? When I say the person, the subtle body, is the subtle body there in deep sleep? No. Otherwise, you would say, I am Andre. There's no I am Andre in deep sleep. But you still want to go to deep sleep gladly, which means that I am other than the subtle body.
Two questions. So we're talking about I am, like the ego. And I see like we're confusing it with the all-pervading consciousness, I, and ego. So can we say ego is also just like any other thought, like a I thought, or a doership thought, and it's the consciousness which just brings it to life, and we say, oh, I am. This is like the ego, because it's like any other thought form.
Well, it is a thought in reference to being a doer, being a knower, being a contemplator. But in the presence of what is there a contemplator? In the presence of I.
I. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So that's the real I. But the ego which we are talking about, that ego, can we say it is again a notion?
Okay, as long as you want to equate ego to the changes,
yes,
then you could say it's a notion. But on the other hand, a different model, you could say that the ego, the truth of that ego is the whole thing, is Brahman.
Yeah.
So there's two ways to understand the ego. One way to understand the ego, the ahamkara, is to say that the truth of this ahamkara is Brahman. Okay, the truth of reflection, reflected light, is the same nature of the original light. Another way to understand ego is how most teachers will approach it, is they will call it a notion. And they will say, I am a doer, I am a knower, I am an experiencer, right? And this whole knower, doer, experiencer, that's all a notion, right? And therefore, and that notion is the ahamkara. Therefore, you're not the ahamkara. You're the presence in whom the ahamkara or the notion is recognized to be taking place.
One more questions. When we are talking about happiness, experiential happiness, we are saying that it's a resolution of all the agitations in the mind, and what you experience is your true nature, which is fullness. What I want to understand is like our true nature, Brahman, or the pure consciousness. Its nature is fullness, but even to like we are still saying that we experience fullness, or there is some element of experiential happiness in it, because the consciousness in itself cannot do anything. It needs a mind, an instrument, for it to reveal itself. So my question is it again a special kind of a vritti, or a...
It is good. Do you perceive happiness? Yeah. Can consciousness be perceived? No, because it is all pervasive. So therefore, happiness is not really the true nature of consciousness. It is just a manifestation, a small taster of all pervasive fullness, all pervasive consciousness.
So then related question would be, so when we say a wise person, there is this concept of like Jivan Mukta and Vidhe Mukti. So when there is Vidhe Mukti, right, then there is no body mind instrument. Then when we say someone would be in eternal bliss, like, but there is nothing there. It's just, you are just pure consciousness. I mean, there is no mind. You cannot have fullness. So I get confused in that. Why do people say like you will be in eternal peace, but there is nothing, there's no mind there to even have that peace? I mean, you are just consciousness then at that point. There is no subtle body or causal body at that point.
Got it. So I think this is a common question is why do I want to be eternal? What is it, just blackness? I am eternal blackness. I'm eternal awareness. At least now I have color and tastes and sounds. No, you have to look at it slightly differently. See, fullness means nothing is missing. Like right now, you're looking at my face. Are you looking at what is behind you? No. You can only look at one thing at a time. Right now, you're only hearing my voice. Are you hearing the voice of those birds outside? No. So you can see how you are limited here. You can only do one thing at a time. When I say fullness, you are everything at once. You're not only awareness, you're also Ishvara. You're the whole thing. There's nothing that is not you. But right now, you are one entity, Ashish. How does that feel, being one entity, Ashish? Whoa, geez, I wish I was in 5 places at once right now. I wish I was in Hawaii. I wish I was, flying in Himalaya mountains. Are you? No, you're not. You're doing one thing at a time right now. That's the limitation of having a mind and a body. How many thoughts are you having right now? If I ask you, what is your name? You say Ashish. That is one single thought. Are you having a thought about E equals MC squared, about the Pluto right now, how the sun is emitting gamma rays towards the earth? Are you having that? No. So your entire experience as a human form in a human body is limitation. But after dropping this mind and this body, I am everything at once. So there's no question of asking, am I going to miss out on my wife? Am I going to miss out on earth? Am I going to miss out on, these great things? No. Verse 55, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan Atman Yevatmana Tushtaha Stita Prajnasta Dochyate.
Sri Bhagavan said, when a person gives up all the desires as they appear in the mind, happy in oneself with oneself alone, Partha, Arjuna, that person is said to be one of ascertained knowledge.
So slightly a controversial statement. It says, line 1, basically wants to state what is the wise person's relationship with desires. We often think sometimes you got to give up material, right, the world, in order to pursue spiritual desires. So there's a lot of shaky business around desires in the spiritual world. You got to give up one to pursue the other. No, what Krishna says about desires is he or she, that means the wise person, the stita prajna, gives up desires that arise in the mind. Now, what kind of desires? All of them?
Selfish.
Selfish, unhealthy. Vijay?
No, tamasic and rajasic desires.
Yeah, basically desires that cause disharmony to others, to you, that are not in your long self-interest, that are going to give you a much harder time in the future, but right now they seem very attractive and enticing. So he doesn't give up, or she doesn't give up all desires, only unhealthy, harmful desires, because desires is your prerogative as a human being. You have the power to exercise desires to help yourself, but also to benefit the society, which is inbuilt in all human beings. You have to help the society because you're also helping yourself. Now, the question is then, why do we then exercise unhealthy desires? Why do we, if we know logically this is not a healthy desire, why do we exercise unhealthy desires anyway?
Sorry, it's coming from the memory, the subtle body memory. So you are bound to even taste those unhealthy desires, but a wise person would think of understanding that it is unhealthy and probably work on it.
Okay.
So that's why you're still having unhealthy desires.
And I'm going to extend upon that because it's from a memory. You know that it's going to bring you happiness. So now naturally you assume one more of that is going to bring me that which is most addictive, happiness. Lorena?
I think due to pressure. So we want relief from pressure. So we take shortcuts at the expense of somebody else's comfort.
Super.
So what's comfortable for me might not be comfortable for you, but I'm thinking about me at the moment. So I'm going to take this shortcut and it might, make you less comfortable.
Because it's also very quick. It's also very quick and it gives you instant desire fulfillment. And by you want to enjoy yourself as soon as possible. So you will take some shortcuts, you will transgress dharma to get yourself as soon as possible.
Or to relieve pressure.
To relieve pressure, yeah. That pressure that it has to be fulfilled for my satisfaction, which you've learned and you've been conditioned to think like that for many years. Lavanya?
It could be because of your past samskaras that you're having within you.
Yeah, so it could be samskaras, right? So that's why you can be born and you will just have this tendency to hang out with the bad boys, or and then those bad boys further reinforce your desires, and they show you they say, no, this is right, you have to pursue drugs, you have to pursue whatever it is. So it just reinforces your circle of influence, reinforces your samskaras.
Thoughts are like waves. They are being generated in the ocean on their own. They come, appear, and go away. Sometimes they are because of your sanskara, sometimes because of your situation around you. So they have a very temporary existence. So then they don't have to be taken seriously.
Yeah. So is it also because you feel that your limited self is the most important?
Yeah.
You don't care about the knowledge of the universal I and all is not there, right? For a person who is operating at that level, he doesn't understand the universal I, one I and all that.
And the
consequences
and all that, yeah.
Yeah, so he thinks that he is the most important. For that, to get his needs or desires satisfied, he doesn't bother about others. He doesn't even see others as a part of him or nothing like that, right? He is not operating from that space.
Okay, that's a unique point. So what Vijay is saying is that, especially if you don't have a strong father figure or friends who reinforce boundaries, right? What is right and what is not right, then you will be much more prone to violating to fulfill yourself naturally. So this is a very good point. Now, next week, I will close now. I will answer this question that we haven't covered. That is because of first of all, the sense of inadequacy, right? I'm inadequate, I'm small, and the fastest way to make myself big, get back to my nature, is through shortcuts, and those shortcuts will naturally be unhealthy. So in that sense, desires become unhealthy. Now, the second is that I want to share is because of willpower. It's a willpower issue. Now, what we don't know is that willpower is like a muscle, and it needs to be developed. And you will see next week how we have done some scientific studies to show you that when you are tempted by instant gratification, your so-called rationalism goes out the window. You are rational in theory, but in real life, when you are presented something that is attractive and tempting, that rationality goes out the window. And you will see through some studies at in Harvard University and Max Planck Institute in Germany in 2007, they've done this, and I'll show you how to counter this. So this will be a very interesting take. Purnamadav, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnam Eva Avashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.